Hey everybody, welcome to the Anthony and Todd Show. We are a weekly podcast that critiques and memes music. I'm your host Trevor, aka All My Heroes Are Deep Dish Pizzas. And I'm joined by my ever-attentive co-host, my best friend, my pal, my amigo, Vincent.
Aka Ameer Truck.
And this is episode 108 of the Anthony and Todd Show, an episode we would like to call Ghostface Killah.
Multiple Ghostface Killahs.
Killah, like
Killah.
cactus is cacti.
Yeah.
Okay. Today we're going to be going over a couple of new releases here. We've got the latest Ameer Vann project, Emmanuel, his first project since his release from BROCKHAMPTON's jail cell. Much thanks to Mr. Brock and Mr. Hampton for allowing him to do this. We're also going to go over the latest JPEGMAFIA record, All My Heroes Are Cornballs, latest Charli XCX project, Charli, Ghostface Killah's latest record, Ghostface Killahs, multiple, and then the latest IDK project. Is he real?
Is he real? Is he real? Isn't that the end of like an A$AP Rocky track?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's LSD, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. Before we start, if you want to follow the Anthony and Todd Show, you can do so by going to Anthony and Todd at Anthony and Todd on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can find us at youtube.com/the Anthony and Todd Show. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts, Spotify, and you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/the Anthony and Todd Show if you want to support us monetarily. So I can buy. I said last episode, I said we should buy one jet ski and then split it up into 3 pieces so we have something to remember each other by.
Somebody on our YouTube comment said that only our moms would donate to our corny ass fund. Our mom's money is just as good as your money. At least we have some money.
Are you ready to get into Emmanuel?
Yeah. Can I tell you something off camera real quick?
What?
I need you to cut this out.
Okay.
All right. Walmart might call me. So if they call me, I'm going to need to pick up. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. If you're stopping, can you scoot over?
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Oh, yeah. I need to raise it a little bit.
A club is a guy who thinks he's fried.
Let's make sure this is not covering your face. That's good. We good. We are. Okay, Mr. Rickon. Time to go over the latest Ameer Vann project, Emmanuel.
Emmanuel is first project from Houston MC Ameer Vann. Since his release from Brockhampton, as I stated, he was there for the Saturation trilogy, and then right before, I guess during the production of their 4th album back then called
Papi
and Teamwork or Team Effort and like a bunch of other stuff. But basically in the production and development of Iridescence, some claims came up against Ameer back in May 2018. Multiple women came forward detailing their experiences of Ameer Vann being emotionally manipulative and mentally abusive, and also engaging in sexual relations with a minor. And Brockhampton, being the, I think, progressive and forward-thinking group that they were, kind of came to a crossroads where they had to say, like, Ameer's our friend, but also if he did this stuff, then he can't be in the group. And they ultimately kicked him out of the group.
But that wasn't the only reason. There's also this confirmation of he set up a friend of Don McLennan's to be robbed.
As we found out in a verse on Ginger.
Yeah, on Dearly Departed. So there seems to be still bad blood there, way more than we even know, going past the allegations. Right. A lot of lying, apparently. But this new project is 6 tracks, it's an EP, and it features production from some pretty decent caliber producers, not indie producers as I thought it was going to be, more minor people, but it's actually kind of major scale. Cool and Dre and Hit Boy are on this, and it's essentially the theme of this is where Ameer is at post Brockhampton, and it's interesting. I don't think it's always agreeable. I think that's the biggest part of it.
Yeah.
I think he has some interesting ideas of replacing friends with drugs and weaponry and essentially living a more violent lifestyle and being kind of consumed by his inner demons still and still not being able to shake them. But I feel like sometimes he just comes off as very petty. especially with any of the Brockhampton references, or at least direct references that don't relate more to him.
Yeah.
I think
it doesn't take a genius or a detective to figure out what he's talking about here.
Yeah, like on Pop Trunk where he says, I am more, I'm not a boy in a band, I am more than a man. I think that line's really cool, but I also think it's like the most petty line in probably the history of hip hop, because
let's take a look at some ratings about how each of them are doing right now. Brockhampton's like up here and Ameer's like down here.
Yeah, it's like what's the phrase? How long are your arms if you're trying to fight with God, box with God, or something like that? I just think of that,
but that sounds kind of cool.
It's like sometimes you're just small and you kind of have to accept the fact. And I think
sometimes you're just tall.
I think he has. It would be expectable for maybe him to at least think he has beef, but I don't agree with it. I think I more agree with the themes of him coming over his own demons, which have been not only relevant in this project, but I think was relevant in the whole entire Saturation trilogy. And I think it kind of sees its way, and it's almost like a conclusion of that in a sense, which is nice. But I also think he's way more edgier on this. He was always edgy before, but I think he's very distinctively edgy.
Way more edgy, I think.
I compare his demeanor to like Freddie Gibbs in a sense, because Freddie Gibbs is not the most respectable person, at least ethically.
He's pretty edgy.
Yeah. So like I compare him in that demeanor, and Freddie Gibbs still makes good music, and I think there's some at least respectable qualities about him, even though I think that he ethically walks some boundaries. But I think Ameer Vann is kind of like that. It's kind of like the same demeanor where I think he's trying to improve, but I also think he anytime he brings up like a direct reference to Brockhampton, he takes like 3 steps back.
I don't see him trying to improve, I guess. I'm stuck on this project because I think that some of the songs are like decent.
Yeah.
Which we can go over in a little bit, but this reminds me of about how I felt when XXXTentacion died. I remember when that happened and everybody was coming forward saying like, oh, X was a great guy. Yeah. X made some great music. He saved my life, blah, blah, blah. And then we got Skins afterward. That just felt really awkward to me. And even now still, the deluxe edition of Question Mark just came out like recently, like at least as of a week ago. And I feel really conflicted about that because X died never apologizing. Yeah. And people still like revere him and say like, oh, he was great. But he died a scumbag. Yeah. Honestly, Ameer here on this project, I know that he's a scumbag, and I'm stuck between what I want him to do and what he's actually doing. Yeah. Because I'm not in charge of him. I'm not going to tell him what to do. I want it to come from a genuine place, but in all honesty, I want Ameer to apologize. And I want Ameer to say, I was wrong for doing what I did. Here's why, and it won't happen again. I'm working on improving. But all across this album, I'm getting notes of like, it's Brockhampton's fault. I've got beef. I've wronged by them because I was kicked out of the group. Or I was consumed by my depression. I was consumed by my inner demons. The puppet master made me do it. God made me do it. The drugs made me do it. Yeah. The alcohol made me do it. Like, whatever. It wasn't Ameer made his decisions. It was, oh, I, Ameer, am the victim of 29 other things that are coming at me right now, and that's why I did what I did. But, like, don't blame me. Yeah. I'm just having a hard time. That's what sucks about this project.
Yeah. Going over my favorite moments of this, because going over this entire thing, I think Ameer still has qualities of his flow that made him enjoyable in Brockhampton. He still has this demeanor about him where he can pretty much just say anything corny ass line he could throw at us. He can mention Secret Agent Cody Banks and it'd come off as like a legitimate line in the song. He has that demeanor and that like kind of weird, tough in your face flow, and I think he's even more in your face in this project. He's even kind of a little bit more ravenous on this project, but I don't think he's as I think adaptable or what's the term? He's not able to evolve. I don't sense a huge sense of evolution out of him. Yeah, something as I think as a new fresh start would bring. But some of the better moments on here, Emmanuel has this weird this huge bass drum in the background, essentially just consuming the track, and sometimes overtaking Ameer, and it's only that bass drum as he's going over this, essentially is a reflection of where he's been in the mind state after Brockhampton. And I think it comes off as like a legitimate new bold place for him to go, and I think it makes a lot of sense for this to be the opening track. But I think it sets up the EP in a weird space because a lot of the other music doesn't have this backdrop to it where it's as reflective, at least production wise. I think a lot of the production on this is pretty basic trap. It's not terrible. I think there's a lot of good enjoyable samples, like vocal samples being phrased too, that are nice and melodic and work with Ameer, but I don't think there's any production on here that is I think super needed besides Emmanuel. Going on to Pop Drunk, which is really, I think, really catchy. Reminds me a lot of his flow that he had on Star.
Yeah.
I think the lines, me and my mom and my grandma, that's black excellence. My girl in Air Force One, like she's the president. I think it's a great line. But I'm not a boy in a band. I'm more than a man. I think that's a really cool line. But it's just super petty. Like you're not the one. You're not the victim in this.
Exactly. Yeah. A note on Emmanuel and some of Pop Trunk's lines. It reminds me a lot of Eminem's "The Ringer."
Yeah.
In the same, definitely a better track or two tracks than The Ringer ever could dream of being, but also falls into like kind of the same quality. Like, I'm right and you're wrong. Yeah. Like you suck because, and then this is why.
Yeah. Glock 19 in Los Angeles go over these themes of Ameer losing himself. Los Angeles, he lost himself for money in the city. It's kind of corrupted him. Glock 19, he's replacing all of his friends with now weaponry, and that's the forefront of his life. I think they're interesting tracks, but when you apply real world ethics to them, that's when I think the enjoyability of them kind of falls, because you see someone who you used to enjoy kind of falter at the things. I think he's making interesting ideas. I think Ameer's the best part of this project and also the worst part of this project. I think when it comes to his performance, how he dictates himself, he's amazing. I think also when he has to say anything, like when he has to come up with like bigger messages other than just like a bold a main theme, he like shoots himself in the foot.
Yeah. Every time.
Because I think the idea of, again, replacing your friends with weaponry and just being an
bad idea.
Outlast, or I can't think of the term.
Like an
outsider. It's an interesting concept. But when he goes into why he's an outsider, he doesn't really redeem himself in that category.
No. He makes it seem like he did that voluntarily.
Yeah.
And he's like struggling. I feel like he tries to initiate a lot of pity from his audience, and like, I'm not going to give it to him. Yeah. I think he's looking in the wrong places here.
Plastic is probably my least favorite track. It just has no consistential reason to exist. It has this very cheap sounding synth. I just think it's too short. It doesn't leave any themes or ideas to go off of, and it's just kind of over. Yeah. I think this has a lot of replayability.
I think so too, because when it's a catchy track, I obviously want to listen to it more, and it's only 16 minutes, so it can't take up a ton of my time. You know.
I think he's making kind of like music similar to like Joyner Lucas, Jack Harlow, that like very like dark side of trap, even like 21 Savage, similar ability in that. This like weird edgy terrain of trap. I think he's better than those acts I listed, or at least he has
not 21,
not 21, but like he has higher peaks probably than 21. But like I feel like right now he's just there's so much more than this. I think there's more than him than trap. And I think that's very clear. Like it reminds me again, going back to Freddie Gibbs. Freddie Gibbs made Freddie, and like even though Kenny Beats is amazing, like there's more to Freddie than just like basic trap production. Yeah. So when he collaborates with Madlib, that makes complete sense, because it's this huge, bold style that reflects the bold characteristics of Freddie.
Right.
I think if Ameer had someone, at least more production that like Emmanuel, the opening track, that reflected that bold style would make this project a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah. I don't think the production's doing anything for him here. When you said that Ameer's the best part of the project and the worst part, all I can think of is like how generic I found the production to be on here. Is I think a shame, because how did he go from making like indie hits? I mentioned in the car High Tolerance from 2017, which I thought was a great track. And now I feel like we've taken a huge step down from there with really any of the tracks on here. I considered, and I think his verses on the Saturation trilogy as well, I think blow some of these out of the water.
Also, I think some of the mixing, or at least the mastering of his vocals, he seemed way more deeper in tone, Saturation trilogy, and this he comes off a lot more like higher pitch.
Yeah.
Not like forced pitch or anything. I don't think they're raising his pitch. I think just the way they mastered his vocals is completely different. Keep in mind, though, scores a futile and meaningless. Right now I'm feeling a big old 6 on this. I think it has replayability. I like the giant theme. I don't like the individual messages behind each of these tracks, because I think he just gets lost in himself.
I think if I'm gonna rate it on a strictly musical basis, I would give it like a 5 or 6 because of like some of the catchier songs on here. But like you said, the production's not doing anything for him here. If I had to rate it like on a theme basis, I'd probably give it like a 1. If I had to rate Ameer, I'd give him a 0.
Are all your heroes cornballs?
Yes.
Your biggest hero is Jerry Seinfeld. He's a huge ass cornball.
Yeah.
Time to go over the latest JPEGMAFIA project. All my heroes are cornballs.
Cornball. All my heroes are cornballs. Is 18 tracks at 45 minutes. Of course, made by the Baltimore, Maryland rapper and producer JPEGMAFIA, who released an album last year, Veteran, which was absolutely incredible.
The biggest, I like the singles. I like Baby I'm Bleeding before that album came out, but it was still such a surprise how much character and charisma and charm this man had by being completely unorthodox, in your face, completely politically brash, and also so there's some insane instrumentals on there like Rainbow Six, Real, that are just completely like out of the blue moments that are just completely unexpected.
Truly incredible. I felt like JPEG was speaking to a specific demographic that I like fall into. He's making references obviously like to the hood and gang violence, but he's also making references to like rare N64 games and NeoGAF and Macaulay Culkin and like
wrestling.
All sorts of just like really weird corners he's pulling together, and I felt like that made it so unpredictable and so fun, which I just absolutely loved it. And then any single that he released after that, I just ate up. The Who, what was the other
what's the one he
did
with Kenny Betts?
Yeah, I was just
Puff Daddy.
Yeah, Puff Daddy. And then, of course, the singles that appeared on this record, I just found him to be extremely charismatic in a very abrasive kind of way.
Yeah.
As well as his Twitter presence, too. He kept tweeting up until the release of this, like, you're going to be disappointed. I'm going to disappoint you someday. And I went into this and I was like, I'm not disappointed. That's great. All My Heroes Are Cornballs kind of serves as a thank you to his fans. He started it and finished it after being on tour with Vince Staples earlier in this year, which is a great pairing. And he says, and I quote, "I removed restrictions from my head and freed myself of doubt musically. I would have removed half this shit before, but nah, fuck it." End quote. Which definitely comes across very, very well in this project. Like, that's a very obvious thing.
And also in a lot of the marketing, saying how he's going to disappoint you, having videos of injury reserve, James Blake, who's in Hannibal Buress, I think was in one.
Kenny Beats,
having them all like say like this album's fucking shit.
It's so fun to watch those groups of rappers and producers come together and make these little videos. Like I think that's so funny to see everybody like in their own little circle. But either way, JPEGMAFIA is definitely like a very fun character to watch, and he released this, and I. Like I said, I'm not disappointed.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
I think I like that idea of just removing restrictions to yourself, and it also applies to like the themes of a lot of these tracks. Like Kenan and Kel, I think is a lot about this and how he's trying to make the shit work. And after being on like stages like Coachella and stuff like that, how is he gonna keep us like presence going? And I like that idea, essentially just changing up the flow again. Like the style again, the presence again, and making it completely something very surprising. Again, I was very surprised because I think this album did the same thing for me it did for Veteran, because Veteran, like, I got through halfway and I was really confused about it. I just was completely unsure about what was happening. This is pretty much the same, even though I've listened to tracks like Jesus Forgive Me, I'm a Thot, and Beta Male Strategies before. It, like, going into the context of this album, they felt like completely different, and it wasn't until about, I think, Thot Tackers and Free the Frail that this album kind of like pieced together as a project, same way around Rainbow Six and Curb Stomp on Veteran. It pieced together into one like full project, and then you go back with a fresh eye on the second listen, and it makes sense. But this album is really characteristically different than Veteran. It features a lot more guitars and synths, which is interesting because these synths can range from Brian Eno ambience level to ow, you're hurting my ears, this is screechy. The guitars can be very melodic and beautiful. They can also be distorted to all hell, and they could sound like Zach Kill is fucking producing a Death Grips beat right in front of you. But going over the character, I think that's a big theme. I think the presence of JPEGMAFIA is more tame this time. I think he comes off as more, I think, fragile, which is interesting because there's a sense of doubt through this entire thing. But I think when he gets a moment to talk, he has something outside of himself going into politics. Like on Papi, I Missed You, just the end, like the two verses on that are just the most explicit I think he's ever been. Going over, I'm a terrorist, I don't spit raps, I spit rhetoric, and I be in your kid's mind getting leverage, cops on my songs, that's hilarious. Just like, he's just very explicit about his mindset, and I think that's really interesting because he's a fresh force in hip-hop, and he comes through, which is a very blunt attitude, which makes sense.
I really liked that about his presence, I guess. I keep bringing up this Twitter presence, but I really enjoy seeing his creative process because a lot of artists, you don't get to see that. I'm thinking like Doom specifically hasn't been on Twitter in multiple years and would just release stuff. Like he would never do like interviews, he would never do press conferences, he didn't show up anywhere, and he would just release music. And like that was great and everything, but JPEG is always tweeting something, and I think since Veteran came out, he's been extremely vulnerable with us, and I've liked that. He's obviously like very comfortable with himself. Just look at the album cover, and then I think a lot of his like getting rid of restrictions on here comes across like as extremely vulnerable. I enjoy his lines because of this. I think. It makes all the difference in his music.
So going over some individual tracks on this, Jesus Forgive Me, I'm a Thot. He's talking about essentially living a thought lifestyle. It's completely strange and odd, but I really enjoy it because it shows him to be more of a bold figure.
He's a cornball.
Kenan versus Kel, as I talked about earlier, talking about how how's he gonna make the shit work. Dropping the fantastic line, man, I really, really wish I was Illuminati. Bad word waiting on the pick, like I'm dropping Yandi. But I like that idea, that vulnerability of the track. I like the JPEGMAFIA type beat because at the beginning it definitely does not sound like a Mafia type beat. Because at the end it gets more atmospheric, a little bit more melodic, nicer, not as hectic. In the beginning it just sounds like a weird mix of like big beat with this weird vocal sample. And also like a Death Grips beat because he's just screaming and it's completely nonsensical.
I like how he put his own tagline in there too. You think you know me? Like, just so it would be a JPEG beat. Like that's all that matters.
Grimy Waifu is, I think, one of the moments that this album doesn't really have a lot of tracks I think you could just isolate on their own. I think it works more as a better album. I think Veteran had more like solo hits you can go to and just listen to those individual tracks alone. This works more as like a piece because all the matching production I think flows really nicely throughout the entire thing. But one of the moments I think I can go back to on its own is Grimy Waifu, where he's essentially comparing his gun to a waifu. it just gives up themes of, is he fucking this gun? And I'm very confused.
He doesn't care.
Which is really interesting in this time period of kind of the humanization of weaponry. I think, especially now at the most, like, I think, the vulnerable point in American history, especially with mass shootings all over the place, we have this ideology of treating weapons almost more than people, or more important than people, which I think is really nice. PTSD has a really cool moment on the production where he samples the sticky key sound effect when you hold your like a button too long, and it creates this weird sound effect. I think it's really interesting. Also in Kenan vs. Kel, he has the HUD interface sound from Metal Gear Solid, which I think is really nice. The little
he uses the PS4 like interface after post verified lifestyle, maybe.
Yeah. Rap and Gold in No Child Left Behind has this fantastic guitar work from Vegan, and has one of my favorite lines of the entire project with I feel like Sami Zayn, my moves are making waves. And I think later on on Free the Frail, he has a fantastic line with I'm now not no alpha male, I'm Carly Rae, you're Braden Walker. Which is probably the most obscure wrestling reference of the year, besides Mr. Motherfucking Esquire's line about Brian Lee. But Free the Frail has a fantastic, almost like folk vibe to it. I think Helena Deland adds this fantastic frail background to it. It's that great backing that doesn't work. That works perfectly, weirdly enough, mashing these two styles. It's just completely weird. JPEG's autotune, especially in that track, in all these tracks especially, I think it comes off, reminds me a lot of his Millennium freestyle, where he photoshopped his face over all the Backstreet Boys. It sounds kind of like boy band-esque, which is really interesting, but it's way more intimate this time around. It's way more it's way more not caring, which I think is really good. It's to its core itself, which is nice. Basic Bitch Teargas has a cover of TLC's No Scrubs, which is interesting.
This is so funny. It caught me so off guard, but I think this was the moment where it really clicked for me that like he's just not afraid of anything.
Yeah.
Beta male strategies reminds me of specifically like how a lot of guys like try to be like bold and brash, and I've got to take care of the house and whatever, and he's like, here's good strategies on how to stay in the background as a male. I think that's so like just this vulnerability and his fragility that he shows on here, as well as like his heart. He like shows a lot of heart on here, and he's not as hardened as he may want you to believe, especially on a project like Veteran. But he, I think he cares a lot about all this stuff,
which is nice.
Yeah, it's a very nice change of pace.
Yeah, I don't think I have too much to say besides I think this flows really well as a project. I think it's very surprising, which is I thought I had JPEG figured out after Veteran. I think like I had all the ideals figured out, but this completely turns a corner and does something new and fresh, and it makes me question him yet again, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, though, scores a few times meaningless. Right now, I'm feeling a 9- on it. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I also really enjoyed this project. It was a lot of fun to listen to. I think that him removing restrictions, I guess I'll start with this. Him telling everybody that we were going to be disappointed by this, I think kind of scared me in a little bit. Seeing like all the different videos, I know like everybody's kind of joking around, but the fact that JPEG thought that he really thought was going to like, he really thought that he was going to disappoint us, and he really thought like someday I'm going to release something and everybody's going to hate me. And that made me like a little scared for this record, but knowing that he's completely like removed the restrictions, if he keeps operating like this, I don't think I can ever be disappointed by it.
Yeah.
I think I will always respect at least what he's doing, and I really enjoyed this. I think it's a really great project, so I'm also feeling like a 9-.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope he just continues to keep on surprising me in the future and just doing weird shit.
Yes.
Just trying all new corners and all new areas to go into. I think if it's as interesting as this, I don't think he can disappoint me any further. Are you ready to get into Charli XCX?
Yeah.
Time to go over the latest Charli XCX project, Charli.
Charli is 15 songs at 50 minutes. Charli XCX is a British singer and songwriter. became popular for appearances on Icona Pop's I Love It and Iggy Azalea's Fancy, as well as her first single, Boom, Glack, in 2014. And then in 2015, she began working with some artists in the British collective PC Music, as well as the producer Sophie, which kind of developed more of an experimental sound and kind of stage presence and image, which has led her to be probably like the most popular artist in this new era of loud and lush, sweet tooth, avant-garde or an experimental pop. It's kind of a niche audience. But like when you think about who else is in this, like Sophie and Dorian Electra or 100 Gex, Clarence Clarity, FKA Twigs, Grimes, I think probably the biggest one out of this. I would even consider Billie Eilish to be in this a little bit, except for she's American. The majority of this album
I think FKA Twigs is American.
Yeah.
So is Clarence Clarity.
But Grimes is not.
Is she not?
I don't know.
I don't know.
No, I think I'm just thinking of grime music. I guess I just assumed.
Elon Musk is not dating a genre.
If you use the word grime, it is automatically not American. The majority of this album is produced by the head of PC Music, A.G. Cook. And I think that Charli XCX is really using her star power here in order to evoke some of the most weird features that she could find on here. Like, when the first couple like singles came out, and I saw like some of the album artwork, especially like for the main thing as well as the singles, I thought that was like one of the coolest like continuity of singles and artworks. Like, I'm looking at like the Blame It On Your Love and the track with Claro and Yeji.
How they all are together in the frame and painted.
Yes, like everybody's naked and painted over. I think that was such a cool concept. Everything flows really well. There's the cool like continuity between that, which I just love that like image that it evoked, and I think that really set my mindset for going into this project as well. Charli XCX has really reinvented herself since Boom Clap. I had to like. I didn't even associate the two until I heard her say boom on one of these, and I was like, yeah, that sounds really familiar. I had to go look it up, and like that's the only reason I even would have put those two together. But yeah, I think this is kind of a weird, like futuristic mainstream pop break, which I'm loving right now.
It's not the most experimental thing in the world.
Oh no.
But I think it's experimental at times when it needs it the most, like at Shake It. I think also Official, White Mercedes, I think when it needs to be experimental it is, but I think for the most part it's very sweet tooth and saturated for a lot of it. I think my biggest, just going over what I think the biggest problem of this album is, I think I don't get a lot of at least lyrical character from Charli. I think it's the biggest thing working against it, because if you go over some of my other favorite like pop releases of this year, you have Carly Rae Jepsen's Dedicated, which I think maybe she's a little too on the nose of what her character is, to the point where she just kind of replicates herself. You have Dorian Electra's Flamboyant, which I think that thing is kind of just based on his character. I think that's their character. I think that's the biggest part of it, is just the character of that project and the lyricism of it. This, I think it's just kind of very contemporarily written, at least with just the lyrics. But when it does break it up and go into more abstract territory, I think it becomes more interesting. But like, I think my favorite moments on this, at least where she shows off a little bit more character and becomes a little bit more cuter or sweeter, I think moments like 1999, Blame It On Your Love, and Official, I think, come off as just like very genuine and sweet, and I think it shows off a lot of character, which I think some of these tracks are just missing for me personally. But I think performance wise and production wise, I think this thing is king currently, because I think it just blends just this very saturated bunch. I don't get really tired of one sound that this thing is producing. I think it all really mixes really well, and I think one thing this album may do a little bit too well is I think some of these features really help Charli. They blend well with Charli, but sometimes I think they don't feel like features, as more or less just like extensions of Charli. I'm talking about Christine the Queens. They blend a little bit too much to where I don't really think it's a feature. But Claro, same time, I don't think they I think need these listed features. They more just come off as extensions of Charli or as more additional vocals that really balance out the track. I like the reason I like moments like 1999 is they come off with this very like warm vibe that I think it just comes off as super wholesome and sweet, and also very bumping. This thing has a lot of bass to it, and just huge kicks that dominate and shake the whole entire section of the track. Troye Sivan on that track, I think his first verse doesn't really do it, and like how they collaborate with Charli, and they do this like weird duet thing, which I think is right nice, because I think what he really has to say doesn't really matter until we go into the second verse, where he reminds me similar to like that one Joba verse on Sweet. We're talking about Justin Timberlake and TRL. Yes. I think it comes off as like there's that personality that was missing from the first verse, and it's redeemed, and I think everything's laid out to the point where I'm not really disappointed with the track. It comes off as one of the best moments on here. Blame It On Your Love with Lizzo is super sweet. I think Lizzo's brashiness really helps her out, and like a very definite sound what this album needed, just something completely different. And I think when we go into Shake It, where it's just this like abstract mess, Big Frida, if you want brashy, if you want bold, that's who you get. Cupcake, I think at the same time adds that feel. Someone like Tommy Cash, who sounds like if Slow Tie was a member of Higher Brothers, fits that vibe. It's just like, I think if you wanted features, I think sometimes it's better to go outside your realm, and I think it really helps out the sound, because it's something different. It's an injected new force throughout the entire thing. I think this thing's pretty impeccable how it's laid out, and how we're getting so much in 50 minutes, but we're just getting these fresh ideas of production and a bold atmosphere too, which is really interesting. Yeah.
I think you pretty much said it all. That was really good. I think I liked specifically how I think that this album is going to start putting more experimental pop into the mainstream. Yeah. I mentioned Billie Eilish earlier. I think she's probably, her and Grimes are like two of the biggest proprietors of that right now, because we're looking at like Sophie and Dorian Electra and Clarence Clarity have not broken into the mainstream, and they're
well, I think Sophie's production has
for like Vince. I'm thinking like Staples. FKA Twigs just did a track with Drake. Like that's
not Drake, Future.
Or Future, yeah. My bad. Why did I say Drake?
Because that's about you figured of What a Time to Be Alive.
You're right. But they're starting to break in, but I think Charli's latest project is going to be the biggest proprietor for this right now. I think that a bunch of these songs are going to start to break in here, and we're going to finally like hear some different stuff on the radio. I really enjoyed that for the most part. Some of my favorite moments, like you mentioned, I like Click with Kim Petras and Tommy Cash. Gives a very like repetitive, almost like clockwork kind of beat. I really enjoy like how glitchy that is. Blame It On Your Love with Lizzo. Right now, I'm loving everything that Lizzo does right now. She's one of my favorite artists out. And I think this track is so sweet and so fun. I love listening to it. It just gets stuck in my head all the time. Official is so sultry and so sensual. I enjoy that track.
Also with like the synth, how it seems like they're just playing one note over and over and over.
Yeah.
And it really dominates the beat, and it adds this really like hopeless romantic vibe, which is nice. It almost
reminds me of like a cabaret song. It's very smoky and dimly lit. I really enjoyed that track, and that's a very low key track. I don't think that was meant to be like a single, but it really latched onto that. I liked it. White Mercedes I thought was excellent. Shake It, I don't even know what to think of this track, because like it caught me really off guard, and if I recall correctly, I think Fantano like really didn't like this track. I think it was like his least favorite track on the whole album. But I couldn't help but be entranced by it.
It's weird.
It's super weird. But like I wanted to listen to it and just see how it played out. Like Big Frida came on here and I was like, what the like what is this? And then Cupcake, a name that I recognize more so, came on the track, and I think I was a little more hooked. Than, the beat's very like abrasive.
Yeah,
it's very
the most
experimental, I think.
Yeah.
And part of me was like, why did this make the cut? But I'm really glad that it did because it's super weird.
Yeah,
I've been thinking about it ever since I listened to it.
It's the most memorable moment on the album.
I think I can't say if it's good or bad.
Not for good or bad reasons. But
it is the most memorable. I will say that. But I did really enjoy this record. But I do have to agree, some of the stuff comes across as a little samey.
Yeah.
Some of the lyricism I think comes across as a little samey, and the parts that I liked the most about it are the parts where some of the monotony started to get broken up here. First track, Next Level Charli, I thought was a really cool solo track by just Charli. No features, no nothing. It was just her, and I think that it went over really well. It was a good setup for the rest of the album.
Yeah. Keep in mind those scores are futile and meaningless. Right now I'm feeling an 8.
I'm also feeling a pretty solid 8 on this.
I like this. I think in the grander scheme of things, I probably like Dorian Lecture's project more. If comparative of that style, that more like avant pop style, I think I like that a little bit more. But this is pretty good in and the essentials of what you need to do to make a very charismatic and confident pop album in 2019. A little bit of the experimental twist.
Yeah.
Do you have a Ghostface?
What?
And are you a killer?
Dropping the hard R on me.
Time to go over the latest Ghostface Killah project. Ghostface Killah. There's it's Killah. There's
Killah.
Multiple Ghostface Killahs.
Okay.
Ghostface Killah project. Ghostface Killahs.
Ghostface Killahs is 14 songs at 33 minutes, meaning that each song is like 2 minutes long. And Ghostface Killah is, of course, a Wu-Tang Clan member and a legendary Staten Island MC, and definitely my favorite member of the Wu-Tang Clan. I'll put that on the record right now. Wu-Tang Clan, I think, really revolutionized East Coast hardcore hip-hop in the 90s. I don't think they get enough credit for this. I seriously think that NWA took over for being the most influential rap group, blah, blah, blah.
I think we're slowly getting it now. I think with the release
I'm
with
really
the
loving
Hulu show
it.
and the Showtime documentary,
I'm
I think
really
we're
loving
it now.
I'm super excited because I have always been in the Wu-Tang camp, especially versus NWA, whatever. But I think that their lasting power has way outlasted anything that the West Coast NWA has done. And of course, they revolutionized this in their first album, Enter the Wu-Tang. 36 Chambers was an incredible record, and Ghostface came through as a very slick and vicious crime boss throughout the entirety of the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. Projects like Fish Scale, Iron Man, Supreme Clientele, 12 Reasons to Die, 1 and 2, both really incredible projects. And of course, 2018, The Lost Tapes. 2017, Apollo Brown did a remix of 12 Reasons to Die, the Brown Tape, which I thought was awesome.
Which essentially just it took the fictionist place of Ghostface Killah's crime boss setting or crime war setting and put it back into its Staten Island Wu-Tang roots, which is really interesting.
I thought it was done extremely well. A very underrated project, but I love that. And of course, 2019's earlier this year, Czarface meets Ghostface, where he teamed up with Czarface, another former Wu-Tang member, Inspecta Deck.
Elucid and 7L, not Wu-Tang members, but still very key components of...
It's not Elucid, it's Esoteric.
Oh, Esoteric. Elucid is Arm & Hammer. I don't know why I messed that up. Both E's, both very abstract words.
Yeah.
But Czarface meets Ghostface was one of the most fun I've had listening to an album this year. It just seemed like both verses were very brash, but also bright and colorful. I think that combination of comic book setting meets urban Staten Island really worked for that mix of Czarface and Ghostface. Ghostface, I think, has been always a member of the Wu-Tang to kind of evolve, it seems like, because we get into some other solo works of some of these artists of the Wu-Tang Clan members. They have a hit album. I'm thinking Method Man in particular. He had his debut, and that was a big deal. But afterwards, he just fall into obscurity, or at least got more well known for more acting or being a TV
same with
personality.
RZA.
RZA,
same deal.
he did the entire Bobby Digital thing. And also Jizza did Liquid Swords, and afterwards followed up with the Genius, and didn't really, or was it Genius, or was it was like Pro Tools or something like that. I can't think of the name of it.
You're going too Big Sean on me. You can't remember everything.
No, I can't remember the name of the project. I can't remember if it was called Pro Tools or it was called
Pro Tools. Isn't that a computer application?
No, it's named after a software. I can't remember which one. But like some more recent lackluster Wu-Tang projects, we got the Mathematics and Wu-Tang. The Saga Continues. It was pretty lame. It just felt like the energy of Wu-Tang wasn't really there, except for like brief fading moments. Yeah. We had Method Man's Meth Lab Season 2, The Lithium, which is the most memorable part of that project. Is the fact that Impractical Jokers are on it for some fucking reason. I can't say
They're
why.
big fans, you know? Earlier this year, Inspector Dex Chamber number 9. Actually, probably like a month ago.
Yeah, that I had to remember it came out.
Pretty lackluster, which is a little surprising because Inspector Dex is just killing it in Czarface.
Yeah. But like these projects didn't seem like they had purpose. Their solo worth or group worth, that just didn't seem like it needed to exist in 2019. But this project's different. Ghostface Killah's project's different. I thought this was going to be a more subtle, kind of almost mixtape atmosphere style album. I thought it was going to be more of like a Lost Tapes like scenario, because on the Lost Tapes he had more like new ideas he was kind of like toying with. Like I think of the closing track where he's over this like hard rock like beat. I think of moments where he's reflecting on Cream. Just some really cool moments where he's kind of like reflecting on his career so far.
That reminds me, Ghostface was on that Miley Cyrus tape too.
I don't want to remember that.
Dream.
I can say he was the best part of that.
Yes. You saying Cream reminded me of it.
But this new album, I think Ghostface is not really evolving in the grander scheme, but I think he's keeping up to at least his own snuff. I think it makes sense. This project, I think, deserves to exist in some realm.
This reminds me of when a musician will do... this is going a little deep here. Yeah. Bach created the well-tempered clavier in order to be like a good warm-up for piano students. Yeah. And I feel like this is kind of what Ghostface does every once in a while, is releases a project that just makes sure that he lets his fans know and proves to himself that he can still be up to snuff in between like the major releases. Like I would consider like the Lost Tapes to be that for Czarface meets Ghostface. And I feel like this is a very similar thing. It's like a warm-up exercise for him. It's just a practice.
Because he is obviously the best thing about this.
Yes.
Hands down. I think the production on this is pretty standard. It's really interesting at times. We'll get I think on Conditioning we get this really interesting flute sample. On I think New World we get this weird kind of almost blaxploitation sample that has this weird like cut in like orchestral moments, which is interesting.
That sounds cool.
So like we're getting like up to snuff beats. These while I think they're not the most notable beats known to the world and are not experimental or push the format any further, I think they're very well organized and they make sense being on Ghostface Killah beats. I think the only beat I'm really disappointed with is Soursop, because it takes more of a dub influence, which I think dub and hip hop, yes, they kind of like cross over, but it's like it's not just like a clean jump. I think more in modern days we think like dub, reggae, dancehall. It's like really close to hip hop. When in reality,
it's become so normalized as well with artists like Drake.
But like it's about as far from hip hop as like rock. And like I think sometimes rock is more easier to convey in hip hop. Like you think of like rodeo, how like you get like more rock like beats. I think I like the like vocal sample, but I don't like the vocals from Harley. I think just do not fit on the hook. Those dub inspired vocals just do not work. But going over the rest of this, I think Ghostface Killah is keeping up to snuff with himself and trying to at least keep up verses that were very similar to previous works and keep up that quality effort. Because I think you start out this thing with Me, Denny, and Daryl and Burner and Flex. I think his verses on that are like fantastic, and he still seems like a villainous crime boss.
Very cutting edge.
Seems like he's still like at the top. He's still the kingpin And the features on Me, Danny, and Daryl and Burner are all Wu-Tang features. You got Method Man, Inspector Deck, Capadonna. It makes sense. Like, this seems like right at home for him.
Yeah.
And, like, everyone, even Method Man, his verses, one of my favorite verses from him. He's just spinning out consonants, syllables, just all over the place, and just these fantastic phrases. I think are amazing. I think Inspector Deck brings a lot of what I've enjoyed about the Starface meets Ghostface collaboration. It just makes a lot of sense. I think when you get past that, a lot of these features that don't work are just not. They just feel out of place. Anything past these like Wu-Tang features just don't make any sense. At least the majority of them. You got like Sun God, Solomon Childs, Harley, Iman. I think it's just kind of they could have some like really redeeming elements, but they're not as redeeming as like or feel as fitting as like the Wu-Tang members.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Iman has this really interesting pitch control. He has these high pitched vocals.
I think that was my favorite non-Wu-Tang feature. I really liked their vocals on New World.
Yeah, it's very interesting, but I don't know if it really works with Ghostface. It seems kind of weird. Like the chemistry isn't really there. I think Sean Wiggs has a decent verse. He reminds me a lot of Kool Keith in a sense. Stuff he's not talking about Foot Locker. But I think for the most part, just like some of these features just don't really fit. Like Sun God, Harley, they just don't really mesh with Wu-Tang. Solomon Childs on Pistol Smoke talking about what is it? I choke your neck.
Legs that I broke and necks that I choke, and he says it like 3 times. When I'm provoked, I let the pistol smoke.
It's just
that hook is so funny to me.
It just comes off as kind of goofy. I think the hook also to Party Over Here comes off as a little bit goofy as well. Ghostface's performance of that, but I think it's way more enjoyable than Pistol Smoke.
I think Pistol Smoke is a better hook because it's dumb.
But I don't think I really have a ton more to say. Except Ghostface comes off as a very villainous kingpin persona that he's always been, and it makes sense. I think he's very up to date with himself. The only thing he isn't up to date, and something I don't think he's ever done on any other project, at least from my knowledge or my memory. He says a lot of homophobic slurs on here, or not a lot. It
Just
says
one specific one, multiple times.
Yeah, and it's weird because he's starting it now. I don't think he's ever done this before. And it's like
Ghostface has always come off as one of those guys that I'm like, he acts really hard, but I think that he does have a heart.
Yeah.
And I think that he wouldn't necessarily like mean to offend anybody, but like it's almost like he was reading the dictionary and was like, I've never heard this word before. I'm going to use it 20,000 times on my record. Like, it almost comes off as like unknowing.
Yeah.
Ghostface really shows his age almost on this, which is just really disappointing.
Which is the only really aspect I think he shows his age for the most part. I think
exactly
he's an
like
old head that really keeps up to date.
Extremely sharp. He's staying extremely like cutting edge. But that specific thing is just such like an ugly face on him that it makes him seem really old for just a split second, and then like.
It's like comparing him to Doom. Like, Doom would do something like that, but it would make sense in the character because Doom's supposed to be this, like, hard ass that you're not supposed to like, but you're supposed to, like, respect. Ghostface Killah is different because he's like a kingpin persona, but it's, like, he still has a heart.
Like, he's lawful evil.
Yeah.
Ghostface is lawful evil. Like, I don't think he would ever do anything that was against, like, mafia rules or whatever. You know what I mean? Like war crimes and things. Like, there are obviously like rules of war. There are rules of like gang violence. I don't think he would ever break any of those because he's respectable. Like Doom is
chaotic
evil. He would just do whatever he wants.
And then he eats some food afterwards. Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing I don't like about that. It's just like, it's just a very, as you said, very ugly face for him to.
And it sticks out like a sore thumb. It's just I think that was a shame to
comparing his use of it to like someone like JPEGMAFIA's use, who just completely like censors out the word, but it fits with the rhyme scheme, so you know what he's saying. Or like Euro Droog said it on It Wasn't Even Close, and Trevor didn't even notice it. I had to bring it up to him, but he says it so subtly. Ghostface just like blurts it out, so it's like very noticeable. At least Euro Droog has like some subtlety with it, so where it's not like, okay, this is more like 90s era use of the word, where it's just like a derogatory term and it doesn't feel like it's just like a terrible old head like move.
Yeah,
this just feels like Eminem style use of the word, where it's just like, go take a nap, old man.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that I did enjoy the project. I think he's up to date. I think he's up to his own snuff, and I think he's at least trying some new things of this, not involving too much, but still trying out some new things that is at his later years. It's not cool Keith age yet. Keep in mind with that, or keep in mind that I'll score a few telemeters right now. I'm feeling like 7.
Yeah, I'm feeling a pretty solid 7 with that.
Yeah. I enjoyed this. I hope whatever we get next is something more like Czarface meets Ghostface, and it kind of pushes the boundaries a little bit more further.
I'm serious. I think this is a practice round. I think he's gonna have something good here coming up.
Moving forward past that, I don't know. I don't know what's next. Time to go to the latest IDK project. Is he real?
Is he real?
Is he real?
JIDK, aka IDK. Now he dropped the J part, I guess.
Yeah.
Everybody's a J. Is a Maryland MC, just like JPEGMAFIA. He's known for his superb technical ability and being one of these up-and-coming voices in conscious hip-hop.
Yeah, essentially him and YBN Corday.
I think those are the biggest ones.
Underclass of these conscious hip-hoppers.
And his most interesting so far have been his more disgruntled performances, especially on 2019 or 2018's Trippy Red Freestyle, and then 2019's Trigger Happy.
Yeah, blurting out Logic's name, giving Logic shit, and which is great in general.
It's fun. It's good time.
But also him being super disgruntled that he isn't getting. He's doing the work, but he doesn't seem like he's getting like the feedback like he should, which is nice because I think for this it seemed like a big release, which is really good for him because I think he has shown himself to be one of the most technical performers in this younger class.
Yeah.
And I think things like him being denied a double XL freshman slot, but like Little Xan skits one is kind of a slap in the face. And Trigger Happy is the conclusion of that, where he just seems disgruntled and completely justified in his performance and his harshness of the track.
Yeah. And this album is centered around specifically the questioning of the existence of God, which I think is interesting for IDK because his backlog isn't huge, but he's big on concept albums.
Yeah.
When he does a project, it seems to always be like a concept album. So he's not really shying away from it. But sometimes this questioning God gets a little blurred in the mix.
It gets like, I think the biggest problem is like the best ideas on this aren't really questioning of God. They're more like either something that's kind of like closely related, so like more about how the churches operate or how sins are, like what type of sins or sins, stuff like that, or like going to like very political subjects, talking about issues of like how his mom died from AIDS and how his stepdad kicked his grandparents out of the house and was just a real scumbag after giving his mom AIDS. So like there's some very political subject matter on here that I think he really shines to himself as like a central figure in this new conscious rap scene, these up and comers, like what more than like I think artists like YB and Corday did. And I think it's made sense. But the thing that I think keeps him back the most is this concept. I think if he didn't have this concept and like skits that related to this concept, and sometimes these ideas of the questioning of the existence of God comes off of more like ideas I had in high school, when I was just like big time atheist, where it's just more of like, they're not unique thoughts.
Right.
Just because you have thoughts doesn't mean you should share them unless they're like really well packaged and put together and they're distinctive to your ideas. Just because something may be important doesn't mean you should say it.
Right.
Unless you're bringing your own opinion or persona to it to make it unique. And I think sometimes he just has a hard time. Sometimes he just falls into kind of similar to what YBN did, just like generic trap artist. He doesn't really bring up any big points. I think on why I like moments like Cloud Blue, 4200 Choices, and Ian Blue, I think, or not Ian Blue alone, I don't think he brings any like huge ideas. I don't think we really get into huge ideas until we get into Porno with JID and Pusha T, which is hands down the best track on this album.
Oh yeah.
Questioning the ideas of if murdering and beating my meat are both sins, I would be a serial killer because he beats his meat so much.
That track I think is the best track on this album, hands down. As you said, the features on here are great. The subject matter is really interesting, and the production on here, it switches up like 3 or 4 different times with that opening like sing song kind of line
strawberry
going into
lipstick, lip lick, whatever he says afterwards. Thick.
It's like blood pressure go drip.
Yeah.
Hoses the devil. Like
I also how that track flows in from Lily. I think is really nice. Lily has pretty much the same atmosphere where it feels like these tracks just flow into each other like beautifully. I also think he has a lot of Pusha T influence.
When I heard Pusha, I thought it was IDK, and then he said King Push at the end. I was like, oh, that's nice. He's giving him a shout out, and then I heard him say yuck, and I was like, oh, maybe that is Pusha.
Because he's like, at the beginning, I swear to God, I thought I was like, wow, he takes a lot from Pusha T.
Yeah.
At the end, the beginning of Pusha T's verse, because I didn't read any of the features, and they're not listed.
Yeah, he didn't list any.
So I honestly thought it was just IDK again. But what I like about this track so much is the features feel big. They feel important. I'm thinking back to some other Pusha's features this year. Benny the Butcher. What was the other one? YBN Corday. They don't feel as big or as impactful. This one feels like it's meaningful. Like it's this big time atmosphere.
Yeah, he like
this
gave
is the
him
main event.
Gave him a throne, basically.
It feels important. I think JID on the back end actually really adds a nice closer to the track, and I think it works out really well. I think moments like Digital, or while being super catchy, I think it's kind of maybe not the most complex track. I like this idea of flashing back and also thinking about how crimes are different for skin color. So if an officer kills someone, he's not going to face any time. But if JADK sells weed or has weed, he's going to go to jail for 5 years. Like, I like that concept, but it's not the most complex, but it's more highlighted by his fast flow, the very synthetic beat that feels like it's almost futuristic in a sense, like we're traveling through time. I think it's really interesting. I really don't care for a lot for these skits, the Ian Blue with DMX, the I do me, you do you, with Tyler Creator. Also the end with Julia, where he's talking about try thinking of explaining the color red without saying the color red. I think these moments just like kind of drag down the album. They don't really make sense. It's cool seeing DMX and Tyler on these tracks, but it just doesn't. It like.
I don't think the skits are inherently bad either. I just think that they were not well placed, and I don't know if they don't necessarily needed. Like, I needed to hear DMX as a pastor, but I don't think that it was needed on.
It's like we don't need to hear Tyler say like, yeah, damn right, I believe in God, because it doesn't actually like coincide with the theme of like believing in a God. It's more like one of those like surrounding moments that like I think this album majority like either has, and when it gets into like focusing on the belief of God, it just kind of gets lost in the nature of it.
I also feel like it ends kind of unresolved as well. I enjoy at the end where the skit, I feel like, drags out the end a little too long, but I'm not sure if it ever really gives like a satisfying resolution, like to whether or not IDK believes or doesn't. And I feel like that's what the whole album was set up to do. Yeah. The opening skit I find to be like really edgy for no reason. Yeah. I think that
with a little kid
it's just a little off-putting, I think. But I did like how there was at least a beat over the skit. I think that was pretty well done. Like, even at the end where he was like, describe the color red, blah, blah, blah. He goes, oh, it's warm and red. Oh, whoops. But, like, even at the end, I don't even think that the problem is resolved. He doesn't know if he's real or not. He doesn't come to any sort of, like, conclusion. And to that to me, even if he said that he didn't or if he did, it doesn't matter. Just at least resolve the problem if you're going to set the whole album up that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Moments that matter the most, Julia Porno. I think going into issues of his family life and talking about the death of his mother, I find really interesting and more personable. Like these are subjects. Losing a family member to AIDS is not, while AIDS is a huge epidemic. Like hearing that in hip hop isn't a huge issue.
It's not very common. No.
And hearing that like story pan out I found to be really interesting, at the same time very huge politically, talking about subjects we haven't heard before in a track. But he made them his own at the same time, so it's just this huge corée of just like really interesting ideas and performances.
Yeah, I also like tracks like Alone and No Cable. No Cable reminds me almost like of a Kanye track.
Yeah.
He's like, change the channel, change the channel. It's the same thing every time at the end. It reminds me of something off of Yeezus.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that almost believes that IDK on this record is almost, he's almost like the anti-Chance the Rapper.
Yeah.
The anti-Chance. Which I enjoyed in a sense.
So he doesn't love his wife.
No, he hates her. Which I enjoyed in a sense. It felt like it flipped that whole kind of gospel movement that we've been seeing a resurgence in here on its head.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that for what it was, but it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, I like the idea of having like gospel music without like the preachiness of gospel music.
It's almost like anti-religious messages in religious music.
Yeah, which is interesting, but I feel like it's an interesting concept, and I think it's just like the whole entire thing is just some of these tracks should not made the cut. I think some of these tracks just should have been should have been finer tuned. Moments that do stand out, Julia Porno, those are great tracks for the most part. And like he does still stand out. Like comparing this to YBN Cordae, because I bring that up again. YBN Cordae, I was just like disappointed, and it almost made me like question what was so special about him. IDK is different. IDK still have like belief in whatever he does, and like I'm not like while I think this is like a great project. I still think like he still shows prominence in like having interesting ideas, still being on the cutting edge of conscious hip hop.
Yeah.
So like, it's interesting. Keep in mind, though, of course, if you tell me this right now, I'm feeling 6 on this.
I am as well.
And yeah, that's it for this week's episode of the Anthony and Todd Show. We made it through another episode. If you guys want to follow us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, you can find us at Anthony and Todd. If you want to find us at YouTube, you can find us at youtube.com/The Anthony Todd Show. You can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/The Anthony Todd Show. If you want to support us monetarily, so I can buy a jet ski and split it up into 3 pieces, so I have a piece of memorabilia to remember my friends by. Also, if you want to find us in audio form, you can do so by going to Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts, and Spotify. Search The Anthony and Todd Show. And until next time, guys, I have been Vincent.
I'm Trevor.
And this has been episode 108 of The Anthony and Todd Show, an episode we like to call
Ghostface Killah.
And see you next time.
Bye, everybody.